Hey everyone, this is Bob here in the Nerve Center at the Wirefly campus with another mini Schmackdown on a couple of interesting phones. On the left we have the Sprint EVO 4G made by HTC, and on the right we have the Google Nexus S, the latest and very interesting phone that's marketed by Google, actually made by Samsung. So this is the Google Nexus S. Now this is the first phone that has been released that runs Android 2.3. So that is a very big feature of the Nexus S. And we're going to talk much more about other features in the Nexus S. On the right, the HTC Sprint EVO 4G was one of the first phones, maybe the first phone, to actually be able to be connected to a 4G data service. This connects to Sprint's WiMAX 4G data service and can get some pretty high data speeds. I've had data speeds as high as 11 or 12 megabits per second on this phone, which is a pretty steaming speed. As you can see, these two phones have different size screens. The Nexus S has a 4-inch diagonal Super AMOLED screen, and the HTC EVO 4G has a 4.3-inch LCD screen. They both have identical resolution of 480 by 800 pixels. But the EVO 4G is definitely a bigger screen. If you're into bigger screens, the EVO's the way to go. However, the Super AMOLED screen on the Nexus S is really, in my estimation, the nicest screen out there. If you can see, it's a little hard to see here, but at the very top, just above the 40 and above the 11 there, that actually should be black. And here on the Nexus S, where these vertically moving pixels are going, pixies, whatever you want to call those, sprites, that's black up there too. And that black is a deeper black than what you have over here. This is kind of a dark gray. And that is the difference between an LCD display and the AMOLED display in the Nexus S. The Nexus S can show true blacks, and that makes for a punchier, more contrasty display. Even though it's a little smaller, it definitely is a very high quality display. I would say it's a nicer display than what you have on the EVO, even if the EVO is a bigger display. Now I like the display on the EVO, and I like the fact that it's big. So we'll come back and talk a little bit more about how things look on the screens of these two phones in just a moment. But there's one thing I wanted to show you before I get too far into this, and that is some of the cool animations that you get on the Nexus S. Now when you go ahead and touch the off button and turn the phone off, put it into sleep mode, it's sleep mode. When you touch it, it does a cool little, you know, like a TV-like animation from 30 years ago. So here we go. See that? It shrinks down to the middle of the screen. Well, back in the days of CRT televisions, when you switched it off, the high voltage in the CRT would collapse, and that made everything zoom down to a little point and then disappear in the middle of the screen. So that's a fun little animation that the Nexus S has. Another one that it does, when you go to the apps, you touch that icon. Let's go back to the main screen again. You touch this icon here with the boxes in it. That brings up your applications. When you scroll through your applications, if you can see, they go off into the distance at the top. They fold off into the distance, and they're coming up from the distance at the bottom. So it's a really cool kind of thing here. They're going off into a galaxy far, far away. So kind of a neat little Star Wars-y effect as you do that. Now there's something roughly similar on the EVO, but it doesn't have that disappearing off into the distance. You have to drag your apps up and down to see them all, but they don't fold around. They merely just dissolve and fade into nothing as they meet the corner there. So I give that round to the EVO. Fun animations, doesn't really make the phone work any better or anything like that, but it's kind of fun to look at. And of course the Apple iPhone has made a living out of showing fun animations to people, and that makes them think that they're getting something a little more. It's a touch of quality. So that's kind of something that the Nexus S has, and it does very well. Okay, let's go back to the main screen on these guys. I'm going to go to quadrant, not because I'm going to run the test, because the test doesn't run properly on the Nexus S. I was able to run it once and got a score in the 1650 range, but ever since I've tried to run it, and I've tried a couple dozen times, and I've shut the phone on and off, and I've uninstalled Quadrant and I've reinstalled it, it hasn't been able to run on the Nexus S except for that first time. So I'm not going to go ahead and run the benchmark test, but what I want to do is I want to look at the system information for these two phones. Now if you look at it here, at their CPUs, these are both running identical CPUs. It's the ARM V7 processor Rev 2. They're both running essentially the same speed. The Nexus S is at 1000 megahertz, which is the same as 1 gigahertz, and the EVO 4G is at 998 megahertz, which is, essentially the same as 1 gigahertz. So looks like they're running the same architecture. Now, I'm not sure what BOGO is, but MIPS is million instructions per second, and it looks like the Nexus S has a much bigger number for instructions per second than the EVO 4G does. Next, I want to look at the memory in these two phones. As far as I know, both of these two phones have 512 megabytes of RAM. That's processor RAM, memory that the processor uses so that it can access, it has a place to run its programs and do the things that it needs to do. The more processor RAM you have, the faster the phone works. Now, if you look over here, the Nexus S says it has 354 kilobytes, or it's actually 354 megabytes. It's 354 megabytes of processor available RAM for the Nexus S. The EVO says it has 424, excuse me. So it's got about 70 more megabytes of RAM for the processor. It's not a huge number difference, a little bit of a number difference. So that would kind of make me think that the EVO could have a little more space in its RAM to move things around and for the processor to work a little more quickly. One last thing, you see here's the display resolution that I mentioned earlier, but the refresh rate on the Nexus S is 68 hertz, and the refresh rate on the EVO is 60 hertz. The 68 hertz, now that's causing the graphics processor in the Nexus to work a little harder. However, it produces a display that's more fluid and more pleasant to the eye, whereas the slightly slower display on the EVO will be a little less jittery to the eye and maybe not as pleasing. So that's a couple of comparisons between the two phones, the Nexus S on the right and the EVO 4G. So a little hard to say here. Looks like each of these phones has its own advantage. The EVO's got a little more RAM available to the processor, and the Nexus S has got a nicer refresh rate on the display, which makes the display, which is already nice, look even nicer. Okay. Now, something else that I wanted to show on these two phones are their respective on-screen keyboards. So, for instance, when I go to Yahoo and I do a search, it brings up the keyboard. I'm going to rotate the phone around so that the keyboard moves around and set it down. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the Nexus. Rotate it around and bring it down like that. Now you can see this pretty clearly. The buttons on the EVO are much, much bigger than the buttons on the Nexus. I can tell you from using both of these two phones that tapping out something with your fingers is easier to do on the EVO than it is on the Nexus. It's doable on the Nexus, but you got to be more careful, got to watch what you're doing. Now, both of these phones have swipe capability, so you can do swipe if you want to. It's a wonderful way of picking up your typing speed. But if you just need to tap stuff in, if you find you're the person who sends, messages very quickly where you tap stuff in on the on-screen keyboard, to me, the winner here is the EVO 4G. It's got a much nicer on-screen keyboard, much easier to do. Both of them could be improved as far as I'm concerned, but definitely the EVO has got the better on-screen keyboard. Okay, let's go back to the main screens, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about something else now. When we got the Nexus S, strangely enough, even though it has Android 2.3, it did not seem to be able to run Flash content. So we went to the Android market and downloaded Flash content for the Nexus S. And ever since we've done that, now it's running fine. It will show Flash content. The EVO came with a Flash player so that right out of the box with the EVO we could show flash content. So that was very interesting, and we're going to maybe do a speed test where we're going to compare the two and how they display flash. So keep that in mind. When we got the Nexus S and took it out of the box, it could not display flash content. We had to actually go to the Android market and download a flash player for the Nexus S. The final thing I want to talk about these two phones, and I can't easily display it here because at the moment I'm connected by Wi-Fi and not by their respective networks, but the EVO 4G, of course, is connected to Sprint's 4G WiMAX network. The Nexus S is a 3G phone. It works best on T-Mobile with T-Mobile's HSPA 3G network. And it will also work with an AT&T SIM. If you have an AT&T SIM and stick it in there, it will work with an AT&T SIM, but it will only do edge connection on the AT&T network, which is considered to be a 2G speed. And so if you want to use your AT&T SIM in your Nexus S, be prepared for slow speeds. If you have T-Mobile and you put a T-Mobile SIM in this phone, you will get T-Mobile's 3G speeds. Now, T-Mobile has good 3G speeds. At my home, I get speeds of 3 to 3.5 megabits on T-Mobile devices. So with the T-Mobile SIM in the Nexus S, I get very nice speeds. However, with the EVO 4G, if you are in a 4G location, and we are here in such a location here at the office. At my home, I don't get 4G, but here at the office, I get 4G on the EVO. You can get speeds around 9 to 10 megabits on the EVO 4G. So from a speed test, connecting to their respective networks, the Sprint WiMAX available for the EVO 4G is going to outshine the network here for the T-Mobile network. That's a 3G network, HSPA for the Nexus S. So there's one other thing that I want to talk about, and that's the available memory that these phones have. The EVO 4G comes with onboard storage for your photos and videos and music, comes with 4 gig of onboard storage, and underneath the battery in a very awkward location, there is a micro SD card that's an 8 gig micro SD card. So the EVO 4G comes with 12 gig of available storage, 8 of which is in the form of a micro SD card. To get access to the card, you have to pull the battery out, you have to lift this catch up, and then pull the card out. It's very awkward, but it is replaceable. You can replace the micro SD card in the EVO with a card up to 32 gigabits, so you can have a total of 36 gig of memory in the EVO for your videos, for your photos, for your music, whatever you want to store on the phone. In fact, you can use this as a storage, outboard storage for your computer. You can plug it into your computer, and the computer will ask you, do you want this to be a drive, or what do you want? Now, the Nexus S does not have an available micro SD card slot. If you look at it underneath, there's the SIM card slot, the T-Mobile SIM card slot. There's no place to put a micro SD card. It comes with 16 gig of onboard storage, and that's the only storage that you're going to get on the Nexus S. So keep that in mind. If you're the kind of person who likes to store lots of stuff on your phone, then the Nexus S may run out of storage for you, whereas the HTC EVO 4G has got lots of storage space if you upgrade the card. One other last final cool statement. The Nexus S is clearly built for people who don't want ornamentation. They want to get into the phone and use the phone the way it is. The EVO 4G comes with HTC's Sense on here. It automatically tries to put things on the screen for you to get into your Facebook, for you to get into your email, for you to get into your calendar and your work email, and so forth. So the EVO 4G has something in there that attempts to make your life a little bit easier for you, thinking that most people want that sort of thing. The Nexus S, however, says, I'm a blank canvas. You can load on me whatever you want to load on me. I will only put on me what you put on me. Okay, there's pluses and minuses to both approaches. I kind of like that approach for the Nexus S. I kind of like the, hey, I'm blank, I'm a blank canvas, paint on me what you want. However, I've also come to appreciate the fact that when I open this phone and I log in the first time, all of a sudden it recovers all of my contact information, and it knows all the people, it knows my Facebook stuff, knows my Facebook friends, and has all that kind of stuff built into it. So I can go either way. I'm sure there's some of you out there who appreciate both of those ways that these phones work. I said that was the last thing, but there actually is one other last thing, and that is that, hey, these are phones, right? So I spent some time making phone calls with both of these phones to find out what their call quality was like. And in my experience, the Galaxy S phones, of which the Nexus S is one, the Galaxy S phones have average talk quality. Not bad, not great, average. I like a little crisper talk quality. The EVO 4G has a little crisper talk quality. So in my view, my experience, the EVO 4G sounds a little better when you use it as a phone. After all, these are phones, right? So this sounds a little better as a phone. So on that note, that ends this mini Schmackdown, which somehow didn't feel all that mini. I'm Bob here at Wirefly. Thanks for watching.